In the shadows of the internet lies a world most people will never see. A world of hidden markets, secret identities, and unimaginable power. It's a place where fortunes are made and lives are destroyed. A digital underworld that operates just beneath the surface of what we know. This is the dark web. And tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain. From billion-dollar black markets to encrypted chat rooms, from government crackdowns to stories of corruption and survival. This is more than just technology. It's the story of human desire, greed, freedom, and fear. Welcome to Zimo Voice. If you want to uncover the truths that others are afraid to tell, make sure you subscribe now and join us on this journey into the hidden side of our world. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you see the internet forever. In July 2017, the United States Department of Justice made an announcement that echoed across the digital world. They had taken down a marketplace that most people had never heard of, yet it had quietly grown into the largest hub of illegal trade the internet had ever seen. This was Alphabay, a hidden empire of crime, concealed behind layers of encryption and anonymity, accessible only through the dark web. Alphabay was not just another online forum. It was an underground supermarket where anything could be purchased: narcotics, counterfeit documents, malicious software, stolen data, and weapons. To the untrained eye, its layout looked strangely familiar. Like Amazon or eBay, categories were neatly organized, vendor ratings were posted, and buyers could browse products with apparent ease. But unlike Amazon, this marketplace operated in shadows. Payments were not in dollars or euros, but in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, currencies that seemed untouchable, designed to float beyond the grasp of governments and banks. At its peak, Alphabay was said to host over 400,000 users, with more than 100,000 listings for illegal goods. It became a fortress of crime where anonymity was currency, and trust was built not on legality, but on secrecy. The mastermind behind this empire was a man known by the pseudonym Alpha02. To his loyal users, he was a mysterious figure, untouchable, always present in the forums, yet invisible in the real world. But in truth, Alpha02 was Alexander Kayses, a young Canadian who had built his fortune not in boardrooms or stock markets, but in the dark corners of cyberspace. For years, law enforcement agencies struggled to track him down. Kayses lived in luxury in Thailand, driving sports cars, residing in villas, presenting himself to neighbors as a simple IT consultant. He was, in many ways, the embodiment of the new criminal elite, wealthy, elusive, global. But like all empires built on secrets, cracks began to appear. Despite the encrypted environment, digital footprints are never fully erased. A small mistake here, a reused email there, and suddenly the invisible can be seen. Investigators from the FBI, DEA, and European cybercrime units began to piece together fragments of data. Slowly, a mosaic appeared, a picture that pointed directly to Alexander Kayses. The arrest came in July 2017. Thai police, working with U.S. authorities, stormed his villa. Inside, they found luxury cars lined up like trophies, bank accounts filled with millions, and servers that connected directly to Alphabay's hidden infrastructure. Kayses was taken into custody. Days later, news spread that he had died in his cell under mysterious circumstances. Official reports called it suicide, but to this day, questions linger. With Kayses gone, Alphabay collapsed. Its users scattered. Some were arrested. Others moved to smaller markets, believing the dark web to still be invincible. But the message was clear. Even in the shadows, there is no true invisibility. Yet, Alphabay was only a symptom of something much larger. The dark web had already proven itself to be more than just an underground marketplace. It had become a parallel world, a digital underworld where cybercriminals, drug lords, hackers, and even terrorist financiers operated side by side. It was proof that in the 21st century, crime no longer needed alleys or backrooms. All it needed was code, encryption, and a buyer on the other end of the screen. But the dangers of the dark web extend beyond drugs and stolen data. There are darker currents flowing beneath the surface, currents that touch some of the most disturbing aspects of humanity. In many corners of the world, encrypted messaging apps and secret forums became breeding grounds for exploitation. Predators, shielded by anonymity, formed networks that law enforcement struggled to infiltrate. Groups on platforms like Telegram, WhatsApp, and hidden forums shared content that was not only illegal, but deeply destructive. These were not isolated individuals, but organized rings, recruiting, manipulating, and exploiting the vulnerable. For governments and child protection agencies, the challenge was immense. Encryption, once hailed as a tool of freedom and privacy, had become a double-edged sword. On one side, it protected activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens from oppressive regimes and surveillance. On the other, it gave criminals an almost impenetrable shield. Investigations revealed how predators used seemingly innocent platforms to lure their victims. They exploited features designed for privacy, disappearing messages, closed groups, encrypted calls. And as law enforcement tried to shut down one group, another would appear, often larger, more secretive, more sophisticated. In the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, in Eastern Europe, entire communities became hubs for these crimes. Not because of culture, but because of poverty, corruption, and weak enforcement. Children became commodities in a market that thrived in silence. International organizations, from Europol to Interpol, began sounding alarms, but their resources were stretched. For every takedown, 10 new operations appeared. For every criminal arrested, dozens remained hidden, protected by anonymity and distance. This is the hidden side of the internet, a world that runs parallel to ours, invisible to most, yet influencing economies, politics, and lives. From drug empires like Alphabay to the darkest forms of exploitation, the story of the dark web is not about technology alone. It is about human choices, human greed, and human cruelty. And it raises a chilling question. If this is what we can see, hidden just beneath the surface, what else lies deeper, still undiscovered? To understand the dark web, one must first understand its architecture. The internet we use daily, browsing social media, shopping online, reading the news, is only the surface. This surface web, indexed by search engines like Google and Bing, represent a fraction of the digital universe. Beneath it lies the deep web, a vast ocean of private databases, government files, academic research, and personal information not accessible to the general public. But beneath even that is a dark web, a hidden network only accessible through special software like Tor, short for the Onion router. The name Onion is no coincidence. Just as an onion has multiple layers, so too does the Tor network. Each layer of encryption balances a user's connection through multiple servers around the world, making it nearly impossible to trace the origin. It was originally developed by the U.S. Navy in the 1990s to allow spies and intelligence operatives to communicate securely. Ironically, a tool built for secrecy in the name of national security became the foundation of one of the largest criminal underworlds in history. On the dark web, marketplaces rise and fall like kingdoms. Before Alphabay, there was Silk Road, the original giant. Launched in 2011 by Ross Ulbricht, Silk Road was the first to show the world what was possible. Ulbricht, who called himself Dread Pirate Roberts, envisioned a libertarian free market free from government control. But within months, Silk Road was flooded with narcotics, fake IDs, hacking tools, and services for hire. In 2013, Ulbricht was arrested in a San Francisco library, caught while logged in as administrator. His trial and life sentence sent shockwaves, yet the dark web only grew stronger. After Silk Road's fall, other markets rose. Agora, Evolution, Hansa, and eventually Alphabay. Each promised better security, stronger encryption, and more trust between buyer and seller. But each inevitably was infiltrated. Law enforcement learned to adapt, going undercover as buyers, embedding agents as vendors, and even secretly taking control of entire platforms. In 2017, when Alphabay was shut down, users flocked to Hansa Market, believing it to be the next safe haven. What they did not know was that Dutch police had already seized Hansa and were operating in secret. For weeks, every purchase, every login, every Bitcoin transfer was logged. When authorities finally pulled the plug, thousands of buyers and sellers were exposed. It was one of the most sophisticated sting operations in cybercrime history. Yet despite these victories, the dark web is like a hydra. Cut off one head, and two more appear. The very design of the dark web ensures resilience. It is not hosted in one place, not controlled by one server, not bound by one nation's laws. It is everywhere and nowhere at once. But what draws people into this hidden world? For some, it is ideology, the belief in absolute freedom outside the reach of governments. For others, it is necessity, dissidents in authoritarian countries who rely on anonymity to survive. But for many, it is greed, the promise of fast money, the thrill of forbidden goods, the illusion of safety behind a screen. Vendors on the dark web operate like legitimate businesses. They offer customer service, refund policies, even loyalty discounts. Reviews are posted to verify product quality, just as one might review a pair of shoes on Amazon. The difference, of course, is that the product may be cocaine, stolen credit card numbers, or ransomware kits. Cryptocurrency fuels this underground economy. Bitcoin was the first, but soon criminals migrated to alternatives like Monero, designed to be even harder to trace. Every transaction is encrypted, every wallet hidden behind anonymous keys. To investigators, it is like chasing smoke through a maze. But the dark web is not just about trade. It is also about information. Whistleblowers leak classified documents. Journalists share stories in secret. Activists hide from surveillance. Here lies the paradox. The same technology that shelters criminals also shelters those who fight for truth and freedom. This duality makes the dark web one of the most complex landscapes of our time. It is not simply good or evil, but a mirror of humanity's own contradictions. Where there is innovation, there is exploitation. Where there is secrecy, there is corruption. Where there is freedom, there is also abuse. The deeper one goes, the stranger becomes. Hidden forums discuss hacking techniques, terrorism, counterfeit money. Services are offered that seem ripped from the pages of fiction, from hacking a social media account to renting botnets capable of paralyzing entire corporations. Some even advertise hitmen, though investigators often find these to be scams preying on desperation. Still, the mere existence of such listings reveals how blurred the line between fantasy and reality becomes in the shadows. And as law enforcement digs deeper, one thing becomes clear. The dark web is not a place that can ever be truly erased. It is an ecosystem, constantly evolving, feeding on human desire and fear. It is the underworld of the digital age, as old as crime itself, yet as new as the latest line of code. The takedown of Alphabay and Hansa sent a strong message, but was far from the end. For every marketplace that falls, another rises from the ashes. Some are run by opportunists seeking quick profits, others by veterans of the underground determined to prove their resilience. The cycle is endless: rise, flourish, collapse, and rebirth. One of the most powerful examples of this cycle came not from drugs, but from ransomware. In 2017, a cyber attack known as WannaCry spread like wildfire, crippling hospitals, banks, and businesses across more than 150 countries. Within hours, computer screens around the world displayed the same chilling message. Files were locked, and only a Bitcoin payment could set them free. The ransomware demanded $300, later doubling to $600 if victims delayed. In Britain, entire hospital networks went offline, forcing doctors to cancel surgeries and turn away patients. In Asia, banks and transportation systems ground to a halt. The cost was immense, billions of dollars in damages. The malware had been distributed through the dark web, where hackers exchanged tools like merchants in a bazaar. Investigators eventually traced WannaCry to North Korean state-backed hackers, proving that the dark web is not only a playground for criminals, but also a weapon for nations. Cybercrime had become cyber warfare. But even as headlines faded, other ransomware attacks continued. Criminal groups like REvil and Connie emerged, offering ransomware as a service. On the dark web, these groups rented out their software to affiliates, who in turn attacked schools, companies, and governments. It was a franchising of cybercrime, with profits shared like dividends in a corporation. Only this corporation had no legal address, no board of directors, no accountability. Law enforcement agencies struggled to keep up. Unlike traditional gangs, these groups had no borders. A teenager in Eastern Europe could launch an attack on a corporation in New York. A hacker in Moscow could paralyze hospitals in South America. The police could not simply storm a building, because the building did not exist. The battlefield was digital and the weapons invisible. But drugs and ransomware were not the only pillars of the dark web. There were also weapons markets, offering handguns, assault rifles, even explosives. Most of these listings were scams designed to steal Bitcoin, but investigators still found evidence of real weapons transactions. To governments, this was a nightmare scenario. Criminals and terrorists acquiring arms without oversight, without background checks, without a trace. Then came the trade in stolen data. Credit card numbers, medical records, email logins, all sold in bulk like goods in a supermarket. For just a few dollars, anyone could buy the digital identity of a stranger. And with stolen data came fraud. False tax filings, bank account theft, even synthetic identities created by mixing real and fake details. To banks and businesses, it was death by 1,000 cuts. Millions lost not in a single heist, but in countless small thefts spread across the globe. Yet, perhaps the most disturbing markets were those that thrived on exploitation. Here, the dark web revealed its ugliest face. Law enforcement agencies uncovered rings where anonymity was weaponized to exploit the vulnerable. These groups did not rely on chance encounters, but operated like corporations, with hierarchies, recruitment, and systems for distributing content. Encrypted platforms like Telegram and WhatsApp became gateways, while hidden forums served as marketplaces. The struggle to dismantle these networks highlighted the darker reality. Technology that empowers can also enslave. Governments tried to respond. New cybercrime units were formed. Interpol, Europol, and the FBI coordinated international operations. Private cybersecurity firms partner with governments, sharing intelligence. But the dark web adapted. When one door closed, another opened. When one market fell, another rose, stronger, smarter, harder to infiltrate. To many, the struggle began to look endless. Like the war on drugs, the war on the dark web could not be won in the traditional sense. Instead, it became a battle of containment, preventing total collapse while accepting that the problem could never be erased. But even in the darkest corners, cracks appear. Every digital footprint leaves a trace, however small. Every careless mistake is a thread investigators can pull. The fall of Alphabay proved this. Even the largest, most secure empires can crumble with one error. And so the story of the dark web continues. A story of shadows and light, of secrecy and exposure, of power and downfall. It is not a single story, but 1,000 interconnected tales of greed, ambition, and survival. Before Alphabay, before Hansa, there was Silk Road, launched in 2011 by a man named Ross Ulbricht. It was more than a marketplace. It was a revolution. Ross, operating under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, imagined Silk Road not as a criminal empire, but as a libertarian experiment. He believed that people should have the freedom to buy and sell anything without government interference. Drugs, in his eyes, were just a product. If someone wanted to purchase marijuana, LSD, or MDMA, why should the state stand in the way? The dark web, powered by Tor, and the rise of Bitcoin gave him the tools to build this vision. At first, Silk Road was small. A few hundred listings, mostly psychedelics. But word spread quickly. Journalists stumbled upon the site and described it as an Amazon for drugs. Suddenly, thousands of buyers and sellers flooded in. The marketplace grew from hundreds of listings to tens of thousands. For many, it was their first real interaction with Bitcoin. And for governments, it was a nightmare, a global drug bazaar, immune to borders, beyond the reach of traditional policing. But Silk Road wasn't just about drugs. It became a symbol of defiance, a digital rebellion against centralized power. Dread Pirate Roberts wrote essays, published manifestos, and cultivated an almost cult-like following. To his supporters, he was a hero, standing up against unjust laws. To authorities, he was a dangerous criminal enabling addiction and chaos. As Silk Road grew, it attracted attention not just from users, but from enemies. Rival vendors tried to scam buyers. Hackers attempted to breach the site, and law enforcement agencies across the world began their hunt. The FBI, DA, Homeland Security, all wanted to bring down this mysterious figure who had built a billion-dollar empire from the shadows. The chase was long and complex. Investigators pieced together clues. An old forum post here, a careless email there. Ross made small mistakes, using his real name in early posts, logging into accounts from traceable Wi-Fi connections. Eventually, agents tracked him down to a library in San Francisco. In October 2013, Ross Ulbricht was arrested, caught with his laptop open, logged into Silk Road as Dread Pirate Roberts. The empire had fallen, but the story did not end there. The trial of Ross Ulbricht became a media storm. Prosecutors painted him as a kingpin, a ruthless entrepreneur who ordered hits on rivals and profited from human misery. His defense argued he was an idealist, a visionary who believed in personal freedom. The jury took little time. Ross was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 40 years, with no chance of parole. For many, the punishment was a warning to anyone who dared build the next Silk Road. Yet, ironically, Ross's downfall only inspired others. Within months, Silk Road 2.0 appeared, followed by dozens of other markets. Dream Market, Alphabay, Hansa, Wall Street Market. Each claimed to be more secure, more advanced, less vulnerable, but each, in time, fell. Some collapsed in exit scams, where administrators disappeared with millions in Bitcoin. Others were dismantled by coordinated law enforcement stings. The cycle of rise and fall continued, a reminder that in the digital underworld, trust is both the currency and the Achilles heel. Silk Road had changed the world forever. It proved that decentralized networks and cryptocurrencies could sustain a global black market. It inspired a generation of cybercriminals, and it forced governments to rethink how law enforcement worked in an age where crime was no longer bound by geography. But as the 2010s turned into the 2020s, the dark web evolved yet again. Markets grew more professional. Cybercriminal groups formed alliances, and new technologies like cryptocurrency mixers and privacy coins made tracking even harder. The dark web was no longer just a marketplace. It was becoming an ecosystem, a parallel economy thriving beneath the surface. When Silk Road collapsed, many predicted that the dark web would die with it. But that prediction could not have been more wrong. Instead, the fall of Silk Road sparked a wildfire. New marketplaces rose almost immediately. Silk Road 2.0 tried to carry the torch, but it too was eventually shut down. Then came Alphabay, a marketplace so massive that at its peak it hosted over 400,000 listings. Drugs, stolen credit cards, malware, hacking tools, counterfeit passports. Alphabay had it all. It dwarfed Silk Road in size and influence. Alphabay's administrator, a man known online as Alpha02, ran the empire with a mix of professionalism and ruthlessness. He wasn't a libertarian idealist like Ross Ulbricht. He was a businessman. To him, the dark web wasn't about philosophy. It was about profit, power, and domination. Law enforcement knew Alphabay was a growing threat. International agencies worked together, and in 2017, the hammer finally came down. Authorities seized Alphabay servers and tracked down Alpha02, whose real name was Alexander Cases, a Canadian living in Thailand. He was arrested, but days later, he was found dead in his jail cell. His empire, too, crumbled. But the takedown of Alphabay didn't end the story, because even before it disappeared, new players were emerging. Dream Market rose to prominence. Then came Wall Street Market. Each promised better security, greater anonymity, and more trust. But each inevitably met the same fate. Some were shut down by coordinated stings. Others ended in betrayal, with administrators vanishing and stealing millions in Bitcoin. It became a cycle. Rise, grow to hundreds of thousands of users. Flourish, become dominant, attract global attention. Fall, collapse under pressure, scams, or takedowns. This cycle became known as the whack-a-mole problem of the dark web. Every time authorities struck one down, another rose from the shadows. But the new wave of marketplaces began to change in character. They started embracing new tools. Bitcoin was still widely used, but it had a weakness. The blockchain is public, and every transaction leaves a trail. Investigators became skilled at tracing Bitcoin through exchanges and mixers. So market began adopting Monero, a privacy coin designed to be untraceable. With Monero, transactions left no visible trail, making law enforcement's job far harder. At the same time, new technologies like cryptocurrency mixers and tumblers became standard. These services broke down transactions into smaller parts, shuffled them with other users' coins, and made tracing nearly impossible. The dark web was evolving, smarter, more resilient, more decentralized. But drugs and fake IDs were only one part story. The cybercrime economy exploded. Hackers offered malware kits for rent. Botnets could be purchased by the hour. Ransomware groups used the dark web to auction stolen data. Entire forums specialized in hacking tutorials, zero-day exploits, and phishing kits. The dark web was no longer just a black market for substances. It was becoming the backbone of a global cybercrime industry. And with this evolution came something new, cartel-like organizations. No longer were darknet vendors just lone wolves. Groups began to form alliances, operating like criminal syndicates. They offered customer support guarantees, even refund policies. It was crime but professionalized. Governments responded with greater force. Operations like Disruptor and Dark Hunter coordinated across dozens of countries, seizing servers, arresting vendors, and confiscating millions in cryptocurrency. Yet, despite the victories, the dark web remained unbroken. For every market taken down, whispers of a new one emerged in private forums. The cycle continued. But beneath this constant battle, something darker was taking root. The dark web was not only about drugs and money anymore. It was about data. Stolen credit cards, medical records, hacked databases. These became some of the most valuable commodities. In many ways, data became more profitable than drugs. Criminals could sell a single stolen credit card for $20 to $100. A hacked medical record could fetch even more. Entire marketplaces existed solely to trade personal data, fueling identity theft, fraud, and scams across the globe. And then came ransomware. Hackers infected hospitals, schools, governments, and corporations. They would steal sensitive data, encrypt the victims' files, and then auction the data on dark web forums if the ransom wasn't paid. This was the new frontier of digital extortion. By the early 2020s, the dark web had transformed into something far more complex than the original Silk Road. It wasn't just about buying and selling drugs anymore. It was about power, information, and control. By the mid-2020s, the dark web was no longer a hidden corner for curious hackers and small-time drug dealers. It had matured into a sprawling, interconnected network of criminal economies, where cybercrime, narcotics, weapons, data theft, and even political influence collided. One of the most disturbing shifts was the rise of AI-driven scams. Criminal groups began using artificial intelligence to generate fake voices, fake videos, and fake documents. Deepfake technology allowed scammers to impersonate CEOs, tricking employees into wiring millions of dollars. Chatbots, powered by machine learning, could run automated phishing campaigns, luring victims with frightening accuracy. The dark web became a testing ground for these technologies, a place where new tools of deception were bought, sold, and refined. At the same time, ransomware cartels grew stronger. Groups like Connie, Lockbit, and R-Evil, some of which had roots in Eastern Europe, dominated the digital extortion industry. They operated with military precision, offering ransomware-as-a-service packages to affiliates around the world. A small-time hacker with little technical knowledge could rent powerful ransomware tools on the dark web, split the profits with the cartel, and devastate entire corporations. What made this even more dangerous was the merging of digital crime and real-world cartels. In Latin America, traditional drug cartels began using the dark web to launder money, purchase hacking tools, and expand their influence globally. Meanwhile, cybercriminals use cartel networks to move physical products like fentanyl, weapons, and counterfeit currency. It was the birth of a new hybrid underworld, where keyboards and Kalashnikovs went hand in hand. Governments, of course, tried to fight back. Operations became more sophisticated. Intelligence agencies planted undercover agents inside dark web forums, posing as hackers, buyers, or even administrators. Some infiltrations lasted for years before being revealed. For example, in one infamous sting, law enforcement secretly ran an entire darknet marketplace after seizing it, gathering evidence on thousands of vendors and buyers before shutting it down. But despite these victories, the dark web adapted. Decentralization became the key. Instead of a few massive markets like Silk Road or Alphabay, dozens of smaller, fragmented markets emerged, each harder to track. Some used blockchain-based platforms. Others relied on invite-only forums. Trust became privatized, based on encrypted reputation systems. The dark web was splintering, and in that chaos, it was becoming even harder to control. But perhaps the most alarming trend was the spread of information warfare. The dark web was no longer just about crime. It became a tool for politics. Disinformation campaigns, leaked government data, and propaganda were traded like commodities. Nation-states used dark web channels to leak sensitive material anonymously, destabilizing rivals. Hacktivist groups published stolen files, exposing corruption, espionage, and war crimes. The line between cybercrime, activism, and geopolitics blurred completely. And through it all, ordinary people were caught in the crossfire. Millions of identities stolen. Hospitals paralyzed by ransomware. Small businesses destroyed by scams. The dark web was no longer just a hidden marketplace. It had become a shadow economy, a reflection of our world's darkest desires, running parallel to the surface web we all know. As we stand in 2025, the question is no longer whether the dark web will be stopped. It is whether it can ever be stopped. Because the truth is, the dark web is not just a place. It's an idea, a philosophy of anonymity, decentralization, and rebellion. Even if every market were erased today, new ones would rise tomorrow. Even if one technology is broken, another will emerge. It is a hydra, cut off one head, and two more take its place. And so, the dark web endures. A digital underground city, alive, evolving, feeding off secrecy and demand. For every shadow it casts, there are millions willing to step inside. One of the most haunting realities of the dark web is its role in the fentanyl crisis. For decades, drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine dominated the underground economy. But in recent years, fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin, has taken center stage. Darknet marketplaces became a key distribution point. Vendors in China, Mexico, and Eastern Europe ship fentanyl in small packages that look harmless. Powder hidden in vitamin bottles, pills disguised as prescription medication, even liquid sealed in vape cartridges. A buyer in the United States or Europe could place an order with cryptocurrency and receive a deadly shipment days later. The consequences have been catastrophic. Overdoses surged. Entire communities were devastated. The anonymity of the dark web made it almost impossible to trace the supply chains. A teenager experimenting with drugs could, with a few clicks, buy fentanyl-laced pills that looked identical to Xanax or oxycodone, and never wake up. The digital underground had crossed into mass casualty territory. But drugs were only part of the horror. The dark web also revealed the darkest corners of human behavior. Law enforcement uncovered forums dedicated to the exploitation of children, biospaces that use advanced encryption and cryptocurrencies to operate. Global task forces fought tirelessly to shut them down, rescuing victims and arresting offenders. Every takedown was hailed as a victory, but behind each victory lay the grim truth. When one network collapsed, another was already waiting to take its place. Then there were the high-profile ransomware attacks. Hospitals in Germany, Ireland, and the United States had their systems frozen by hackers demanding payment in Bitcoin. Patients were turned away. Surgeries were canceled. In one tragic case, a patient died after being rerouted to another hospital during a ransomware-induced shutdown. The dark web was no longer just about financial crimes. It was threatening lives in real time. Even corporations and governments found themselves powerless. City councils were forced to pay ransoms to regain access to essential services. Universities lost decades of research. Multinational corporations had their trade secrets leaked on dark web forums for competitors to see. It was digital warfare, fought not with guns and bombs, but with code, encryption, and fear. Yet, within all this darkness, there were also those who saw the dark web as a tool for good. Whistleblowers used it to leak government secrets and corporate scandals. Journalists in authoritarian countries use onion sites to communicate safely with sources. Human rights activists smuggled out evidence of war crimes, relying on the anonymity of the dark web to stay alive. This duality is what makes the dark web so complex. It is not purely evil nor purely good. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's brightest ideals and its darkest instincts. A place where freedom and exploitation coexist, where truth and lies collide, where hope and despair are only a click apart. And this is the paradox. For every fentanyl dealer, there's a dissident using the dark web to survive. For every hacker selling ransomware, there's a journalist exposing corruption. The same tools that protect the criminal also protect the oppressed. This is why the dark web cannot simply be deleted. It is not just a criminal haven. It is a battleground for ideas, information, and morality. It forces us to confront a terrifying question. Do we destroy the dark web to fight crime, even if it means silencing those who depend on it for survival? Or do we preserve in the name of freedom, even if it means empowering criminals in the shadows? This is the moral gray zone of the digital age. As we enter the mid-2020s, the dark web is no longer just a hidden marketplace. It has evolved into a constantly mutating organism, powered by innovation and greed. One of the most alarming trends is the rise of AI-powered cybercrime. Criminals are no longer just writing simple phishing emails. They are training artificial intelligence to create scams that adapt in real time. Imagine receiving a phone call for what sounds exactly like your boss or your mother, a voice cloned perfectly by AI. These deepfake voices can demand money, reveal sensitive data, or trick employees into wiring funds. And behind it all, the purchase order, the malware, the stolen data, it's all managed on the dark web. But AI goes beyond voices. Hackers now use generative models to write flawless phishing emails, design fake documents, or even generate realistic photos of people who don't exist. These synthetic identities can be used to open bank accounts, apply for loans, or bypass security checks. It's fraud on a scale we've never seen before, and it's nearly impossible to detect with the naked eye. At the same time, the dark web is seeing a boom in biometric identity theft. In the past, criminals stole credit card numbers. Today, they steal fingerprints, facial scans, and even iris data. With so many governments and companies relying on biometrics for security, this type of theft is devastating. Once your fingerprint or face is stolen, you can't change it like a password. It's permanent. And on the dark web, biometric data has become a high-value commodity. Another innovation is the move toward decentralized marketplaces. Traditional dark web markets had a weakness: central servers that law enforcement could seize. Now, some criminals are experimenting with blockchain-based markets where no single server exists. Instead, the marketplace lives on a decentralized network, resistant to takedowns. Payments are made in privacy coins like Monero or Scash, and transactions are layered with mixers to obscure every trail. It's the dark web, but with the resilience of cryptocurrency itself. These new platforms also rely on reputation systems, coded into smart contracts. Vendors and buyers build trust scores that cannot easily be faked. Disputes are settled through escrow contracts that release funds automatically when conditions are met. It is, in many ways, a dark mirror of legitimate e-commerce, Amazon and eBay, but built for crime and nearly impossible to shut down. Meanwhile, ransomware cartels continue to dominate. What began as isolated hackers has transformed into multinational syndicates. Some groups run their operations like corporations, with customer support hotlines, negotiators, and PR statements on dark web blogs. They even recruit affiliates openly, offering commission deals for those willing to spread ransomware in exchange for a cut of the profits. But it's not just money driving these cartels. Some attacks are political. Hospitals, schools, and even critical infrastructure like pipelines have been targeted. A single dark web forum post can cripple an entire city overnight. And because many groups operate from countries that shield them, international law enforcement is often powerless. The convergence of AI, ransomware, biometrics, and decentralized platforms has made the dark web more dangerous and more permanent than ever. It is no longer a fringe playground. It is a parallel economy, deeply embedded in the digital age. And yet, this economy still depends on a single human flaw: trust. Criminals must trust that their customers will pay. Buyers must trust that vendors will deliver. Hackers must trust that their partners won't betray them. And it is in these fragile cracks of trust that law enforcement, researchers, and white hat hackers still find opportunities to strike back. The question is not whether the dark web will survive. It has already proven that it will. The real question is, what will it become? A hidden economy that rivals the surface world? Or a force so destructive that it reshapes how we think about freedom, security, and power itself? The dark web has always been about evolution. Every time authorities discover a weakness, criminals adapt. Every time one marketplace falls, another rises stronger. And now, as we look toward the future, the possibilities are both fascinating and terrifying. One of the biggest shifts on the horizon is the rise of quantum-proof encryption. Today, most of the dark web depends on Tor and standard encryption algorithms to stay hidden. But researchers warn that quantum computers, once powerful enough, could break these protections. This would expose identities, transactions, and even entire marketplaces. Criminals know this, and they are preparing. Already, whispers on forums speak of post-quantum encryption systems, algorithms designed to withstand quantum attacks. If adopted widely, this would make the dark web even harder to penetrate, locking it behind a wall of mathematics that even governments may not be able to climb. At the same time, the concept of AI-governed markets is emerging. Imagine a marketplace with no human administrator, no weak point for law enforcement to exploit. Instead, an AI runs a platform, verifying vendors, resolving disputes, and managing cryptocurrency escrow automatically. No bribes, no arrests, no betrayal. Just code executing ruthlessly without error or fear. If such systems become real, they could create a new generation of marketplaces that are truly unstoppable. The dark web is also expected to merge more deeply with the surface world. Already, ransomware cartels are hitting hospitals, pipelines, and city governments. In the next decade, this could escalate into full-blown cyber wars. Instead of missiles and tanks, nations may cripple each other with dark web tools, shutting down power grids, collapsing stock markets, or hijacking satellites. The battlefield of the future may not be physical land, but digital territory hidden beneath layers of anonymity. And yet, the dark web will also continue to serve as a tool of resistance. Journalists, whistleblowers, and political dissidents will still use it to evade censorship. For people living under authoritarian regimes, it may remain one of the few ways to speak truth without fear of death. In that sense, the dark web will always be a paradox, both a weapon of freedom and a weapon of destruction. Another future trend may be the rise of biohacking and genetic black markets. As technology advances, genetic data will become as valuable as financial data. On dark web forums, stolen DNA records may be sold to insurance companies, employers, or even governments. Black markets could emerge around unregulated gene editing, enhancement drugs, or cloned organs. The same way fentanyl spread to the dark web, future biotech crimes could follow the same path. And then there is the question of virtual reality. As the metaverse develops, criminals may carve out hidden VR spaces accessible only through dark web networks. Imagine walking into a digital nightclub where illegal trades happen in real time. Drugs, weapons, stolen data, all visualized in immersive 3D worlds. Law enforcement could find themselves chasing shadows not on a screen, but inside a virtual city built for crime. The final frontier may be the merger of AI, quantum security, and decentralization, creating a dark web so advanced that it becomes a permanent fixture of human civilization. Not just a hidden corner, but shadow twin of the internet, equally vast, equally powerful, existing forever beyond the reach of governments. Whether that future comes true depends on one thing: demand. As long as there are people who crave freedom, secrecy, profit, or power, the dark web will thrive. Because the dark web is not really about technology. It is about us. It is about what humans will do when given the chance to act without rules, without oversight, without consequences. And that is why, in the end, the dark web is not just a mirror of the internet. It is a mirror of ourselves. a reflection of the best and worst instincts of humanity, magnified, amplified, and unleashed into digital unknown. The dark web is more than just a network. It is a stage where the hidden dramas of humanity unfold. Every marketplace, every forum, every encrypted chat, it all tells a story about who we are when no one is watching. In the surface world, laws and norms shape our behavior. We obey traffic lights, we sign contracts, we pay taxes. Not always because we want to, but because there are consequences if we don't. But the dark web strips all that away. It removes the referee, the policeman, the courtroom. It gives humans something we rarely experience: absolute freedom. And when that freedom is granted, the results are mixed. Some use it to fight tyranny, to leak truths, to protect the innocent. Others use it to exploit, to profit, to destroy. The dark web exposes a brutal reality, that morality, in many ways, is not universal. It is conditional. It is shaped by surveillance, fear, and accountability. When those vanish, morality bends. This is why philosophers compare the dark web to Plato's tale, The Ring of Gyges, a ring that makes its wearer invisible. Plato asked, if a man could commit crimes unseen, would he still remain just? Or would he give in to temptation? The dark web is humanity's modern ring of Gyges. And the answer, sadly, seems clear. Yet we must not overlook the light within the darkness. For every drug dealer making millions, there is a whistleblower risking their life. For every hacker selling ransomware kits, there is a journalist revealing war crimes. The dark web is not only a market of greed, but also a sanctuary of courage. It is proof that when people are silenced on the surface, they will always find another way to speak. But there's a deeper question, one that haunts policymakers, philosophers, and ordinary citizens alike. Do we need the dark web? On one hand, it is a breeding ground for crime. Billions lost in fraud, thousands dead from overdoses, countless lives ruined by exploitation. On the other hand, it is a shield against oppression. Without it, truth would wither in the shadows of authoritarianism. The dark web is both poison and cure. And this duality mirrors society itself. Because for as long as humans exist, there will be greed and kindness, cruelty and compassion. The dark web did not create these traits. It only revealed them, magnified them, freed them from restraint. It is a digital jungle, wild, raw, and untamed. And just like the jungle, it cannot be destroyed. It can only be managed, studied, and feared. The rise of the dark web also forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own systems. Why are drugs so profitable online? Because demand exists. Why do stolen credit cards flood marketplaces? Because our financial system is fragile. Why do whistleblowers risk everything to leak documents anonymously? Because the institutions of democracy sometimes fail to protect truth. In this sense, the dark web is not an alien world. It is a reflection of our own failures. Every crime committed there begins with a need or desire in the surface world. The dark web does not invent evil. It amplifies what is already within us. And perhaps the most frightening part of all is this: the dark web is growing, but so are the people who depend on it. Ordinary citizens now buy privacy tools, encrypted messengers, VPNs. What was once the domain of criminals is becoming mainstream. The line between dark and clear is blurring. Soon, the dark web may not be a separate place at all. It may simply be another layer of everyday life. And so, the dark web remains one of the greatest paradoxes of our digital age. A place where freedom and danger live side by side, where truth and lies are indistinguishable, and where the best and worst of humanity collide. It has been called many names: a black market, a digital underworld, a modern Pandora's box. But in truth, it is something far more complex. It is a mirror, a reflection of our collective desires, fears, and ambitions. For every story of corruption, there is one of courage. For every act of greed, an act of resistance. The dark web is not only about crime. It is about choice. The choices we make when no one is watching. The choices that define who we truly are. And as technology evolves, so too will this hidden world. New tools, new networks, new marketplaces will rise and fall. Governments will continue their cat-and-mouse game, taking down one site only for another to emerge. But the truth is simple. The dark web cannot be destroyed. It can only be understood. Perhaps, then, the real lesson lies not in trying to erase it, but in asking ourselves why it exists, why people turn to it for answers, for profit, for protection. And until those questions are answered, the dark web will remain, an uncharted sea beneath the surface, forever pulling in those bold enough, desperate enough, or reckless enough to enter. This, then, is the reality of the hidden internet, a place that is not separate from us, but a shadow of us, a place where our darkest impulses and brightest hopes are written in code, encrypted, and buried deep below the surface web we all know. As we close this exploration, remember, the dark web is not just a network of machines. It is a network of people, and people, in all their complexity, will always find ways to hide, to speak, to exploit, and to dream. So the question is not whether the dark web will survive. The question is whether we, as a society, will learn to face the truths it reveals about us. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the hidden corners of the internet. What do you think about the dark web? Is it a necessary tool for freedom or a dangerous playground for crime? Write your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this documentary thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and stay with us for more deep explorations into the untold stories of our world. Because the truth is often hidden, waiting to be unveiled.